A 7-year-old boy stood up in court and declared, "I am my mother's lawyer." The judge thought it was a joke until he realized the boy knew more about the law than many seasoned attorneys. "I am my mother's lawyer," said Caleb Silva, a 7-year-old black boy standing before the judge, clutching a folder of papers in his small hands, his chin raised as if he'd been a practicing attorney for decades. The courtroom of the Third Family Court fell utterly silent. It was as if someone had paused the world for a few seconds. Judge Robert Johnson, a 58-year-old man with 3 decades on the bench, slowly removed his glasses and cleaned them carefully, as if questioning his own vision. Never in his career had he witnessed anything like this, a child presenting himself as a lawyer in his courtroom. "Sorry, young man, but I think you're confused. This is a courtroom, not a place for games," he said gently, assuming the boy had wandered away from his parents. "I'm not playing, Your Honor," Caleb replied, his voice steady but his heart racing. "I'm here to represent my mother, Rosanna Silva, in custody case number 00345-Z1224. My father, Richard Carter, is seeking my custody with ulterior financial motives." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Lawyers stopped scrolling on their phones. Clerks dropped their pens. Secretaries turned for a better view. Even the security guard at the door stepped closer, intrigued by this unprecedented scene. On the right side of the room, Richard Carter, 42, in an expensive dark suit, burst into laughter. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The boy's playing school, wasting our time with childish antics." Beside him, Dr. Michael Harris, his polished 50-year-old private attorney in a $1,200 suit, stood immediately. "Your Honor, I respectfully request that the minor be removed from the courtroom. This is a mockery of the court and legal proceedings." But Caleb didn't budge an inch. His deep brown eyes shone with a determination that belied his age. "Your Honor, under Article 28 of the Child and Adolescent Statute, I have the right to be heard in any judicial proceeding involving my interests." Silence reclaimed the courtroom, but now it was different, a stunned silence. A 7-year-old black boy had just cited a specific law with the precision of a seasoned jurist. Dr. Michael blinked repeatedly, trying to process what he'd heard. He memorized some lines from the internet, "Your Honor. Any kid can do that with Google nowadays." "Then may I continue, Doctor?" Caleb turned to him with disarming politeness. Article 1634 of the Civil Code states that parental authority includes guiding the upbringing and education of children. My father failed in that duty when he abandoned me for 3 consecutive years. Dr. Michael choked on his own saliva. Richard stopped laughing abruptly. Article 1583 of the same code, Caleb continued, stipulates that custody is unilateral when one parent fails to provide suitable conditions for exercising parental authority. Article 1586 states that this authority cannot be exercised against the child's interests. Judge Johnson leaned forward, utterly captivated. In 30 years, he'd never seen a trained lawyer cite laws so fluently, let alone a child. Furthermore, Caleb opened his homemade folder, a school binder decorated with superhero stickers but filled with meticulously organized documents. "I have evidence proving my father's true intentions." He pulled out an old cell phone, a simple device that contrasted with the sophistication of his legal arguments. "I recorded a conversation where he admits he only wants me because of a $600,000 inheritance I'm set to receive from my grandfather." The courtroom exploded. Richard went pale as paper. Dr. Michael stood so quickly he knocked over his chair. From the back row, Rosanna Silva, a 32-year-old black woman, slim, in a simple clean blouse, covered her face and began to sob. "This is outrageous!" Dr. Michael shouted, losing all composure. "Clandestine recording, inadmissible evidence. I request it be dismissed." Caleb looked at him with astonishing calm. "Doctor, the recording isn't clandestine when made by me to protect my own rights. Law 13441 of 2017, Article 4, Clause 2, guarantees a child's right to seek protection." Dr. Michael was speechless. A 7-year-old had just schooled him in law. "Your Honor," Caleb continued, May I play the recording for everyone to hear? The judge nodded, still processing the surreal situation. You may. Caleb navigated the phone with small, steady fingers. Richard's voice echoed through the courtroom, clear and damning. Listen, lawyer, I want the boy's custody, and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to make up. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Each word from the recording hit like a hammer. The kid's gonna inherit a hefty sum from his granddad when he turns 18. I'm talking nearly $600,000. If I get custody, I control that money. People in the gallery shook their heads in disgust. It was impossible to hear this without feeling outrage. The kid's mother doesn't know about the inheritance. That woman can barely read, let alone understand estates. By the time she figures it out, I'll have it all sorted. Richard's cruel laugh on the recording prompted hushed curses from the audience. Rosanna sobbed louder, overwhelmed by emotion and humiliation. So it's settled, Richard continued. File for custody tomorrow. Claim the mother's unfit, leaves the kid alone, no proper home, the usual stuff you guys know how to spin. Caleb paused the recording, and silence gripped the room. He looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, this conversation was recorded on March 15th at 2:30 p.m. 3 days later, on March 18th, my father filed for custody, alleging exactly those lies. He pulled more papers from his folder. Here's a copy of his petition. The judge took the documents, reviewing each line. And do these allegations hold? They're all false, Your Honor, Caleb said, organizing more papers. First, my school report card for the last 2 years. He handed over the sheets. As you can see, I'm the top student in my class in every subject. English, math, science, history. Overall average, 9.8. The judge examined the documents, impressed not only by the grades but by Caleb's impeccable organization. Second, Caleb continued, a statement from my school confirming I'm never late, always well cared for, well fed, and that my mother actively participates in all school meetings. Dr. Michael tried to regain footing. Your Honor, school documents can easily be manipulated by interested parties. Are you accusing my school of forging documents, Doctor? Caleb asked, turning to him with a serious expression that made the man swallow hard. I didn't say that exactly. Because if you are, I can call my teacher, Ms. Emily Thompson, to testify right now. She's waiting in the hallway. The judge smiled for the first time. Call your teacher, Caleb. The courtroom door opened, and Emily Thompson entered, a 40-year-old black woman with her hair in a neat bun, wearing a blue blouse and black skirt that made her look more lawyer than teacher. Seeing Caleb command the hearing with such competence, her eyes welled with pride. Ms. Emily, the judge addressed her, can you tell us about Caleb's family situation? I can, Your Honor, Emily said, placing a hand on Caleb's shoulder in support. I've known Caleb and his family for 2 years. Rosanna is an exemplary mother. She works hard but never neglects her son's care. Is the child ever left alone? Never, Your Honor. Caleb stays at school full-time. When classes end, he stays with me in the teacher's lounge doing homework until his mother picks him up, always well-fed, in a clean uniform, with complete school supplies. And the father? Does he participate in Caleb's school life? Emily looked directly at Richard, who seemed to shrink in his chair. In 2 years, Your Honor, he's shown up at school exactly 0 times. Never asked about grades, behavior, or his son's needs. For all practical purposes, he's absent from Caleb's school life. That's not true. Richard exploded, standing. I've always cared about my son. Caleb crossed his arms, his posture impressing everyone with its maturity. Then tell me, Dad, what's my teacher's full name? What grade am I in? What's my favorite subject? Who's my best friend? When's my birthday? Richard was utterly silent, unable to answer a single basic question about his son. Let me help you, Caleb said with a chilling calm that pierced everyone's hearts. My teacher's name is Emily Thompson. I'm in 2nd grade. My favorite subject is English. My best friend is Julian. My birthday is September 12th. Richard's embarrassment was palpable. I don't need to memorize these things. You don't need to memorize, Dad. You need to be present. You need to love for real, not pretend to love for money. The courtroom was silent. That simple statement from a 7-year-old black boy encapsulated the tragedy of the case. Your Honor, Caleb continued, I have one more important piece of evidence. He pulled another document from his folder. Proof that my father hasn't paid child support for exactly 3 years and 2 months. $0. How do you survive? The judge asked, genuinely curious. My mother works as a cleaning assistant at Total Cleaning Company. She leaves at 5 a.m. and returns at 8 p.m. She earns a minimum wage and a half. It's not much, but she gives me everything a child needs: food, clean clothes, school supplies, medical care when needed. Caleb paused, glancing at Rosanna in the back. And above all, Your Honor, she gives me true love every single day. Rosanna wept openly, moved by her son's defense. Therefore, Caleb turned back to the judge, under Article 1566 of the Civil Code, which outlines parental duties of support, upbringing, and education, my father has failed in every aspect. Dr. Michael was out of arguments. A 7-year-old had delivered a legal masterclass he couldn't counter. Under Article 1637 of the same code, Caleb continued relentlessly, parental authority is extinguished by acts contrary to good morals. Abandoning a son for 3 years, then trying to use him for profit, fits that definition perfectly. The judge took notes, clearly impressed by the boy's legal acumen. Caleb, do you have anything else to present? Yes, Your Honor, but first I'd like to exercise a right guaranteed by Law 13431 of 2017. What right? The right of a child to be heard in judicial proceedings concerning them. I want to speak directly to you about what I feel and want. The judge nodded solemnly. Speak, Caleb. The boy took a deep breath, organized his thoughts, and spoke with a maturity that moved everyone. Your Honor, for 7 years, I wondered why my dad didn't live with us, why he only showed up occasionally, why he never played with me like my friends' dads. I thought maybe it was my fault, that I wasn't a good enough son, that if I got better grades or behaved better, he'd come back. Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. But 3 weeks ago, I learned the truth. My dad didn't abandon me because I wasn't good enough. He abandoned me because to him, I'm just a kid, not a son, and now he wants to use me to get rich. Caleb turned to Richard, who couldn't meet his gaze. Dad, I don't hate you, but I don't want to be your tool for profit. I want to be loved for who I am, not for the money I might bring. The courtroom was silent. Even the most seasoned staff were visibly moved. So, Your Honor, Caleb continued, I make 2 official requests. What requests? First, that my custody remain with my mother, who truly loves me and raised me with dignity, even with little money. And second, Caleb took a deep breath, dropping a bombshell that left everyone stunned. Second, I formally renounce my grandfather's $600,000 inheritance. The courtroom gasped in shock. Even the judge's eyes widened. Caleb, are you sure? Absolutely, Your Honor. I'd rather live with love and dignity with my mom than be rich with a father who doesn't truly love me. Richard stood, desperate. He can't do that. He's a minor, he lacks capacity. You're mistaken, Dad, Caleb replied calmly. Article 1804 of the Civil Code allows renunciation of inheritance through a legal representative. My mother is my legal representative and will sign on my behalf. Dr. Michael made a final desperate attempt. Your Honor, this is absurd. The minor is clearly being manipulated. Manipulated by whom, Doctor? The judge asked with irony. By the mother who works 12 hours a day to support him? By the teacher who taught him to defend himself? Or by the father trying to use him to get rich? Caleb stepped closer to the bench. Your Honor, May I ask a personal question? You may. Do you have children? I have two. Do they know you love them? Of course they do. I envy them, Caleb said with devastating simplicity. Because I've never known if my dad truly loved me. Now I know he doesn't. How do you know? Because someone who loves doesn't hurt the person they love. My dad is willing to take me from my mom, who's my whole world, just to access my money. That's not love, Your Honor. That's pure greed. The judge was silent for long seconds, visibly touched by the boy's extraordinary maturity. Caleb, he said finally, you are a remarkable young man. I've never seen anything like this in my career. Thank you, Your Honor. May I continue presenting my evidence? You may, Counselor Caleb, the judge said, the affectionate nickname echoing through the courtroom as official recognition. This boy had earned not just the judge's respect but everyone's present. And he wasn't done yet. The first round was over, and Caleb had won a technical knockout, but the fight wasn't finished. Proceed, Counselor Caleb, the judge said. Caleb organized his papers with the precision of a seasoned attorney while Dr. Michael sweated and Richard buried his face in his hands, knowing he was defeated. Thank you, Your Honor, Caleb said, pulling more documents from his superhero folder. Now I'll prove all my father's allegations are fabricated lies. He opened a laminated sheet carefully. Here's the floor plan of our apartment, drawn by the building's management. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, bathroom, and laundry area. Total of 485 square feet. The judge examined it. And what issue does your father raise about the home? He claims in his petition that we live in an unsanitary room with inadequate conditions, Caleb read from the filing. But as you can see, we have suitable space for 2 people. Dr. Michael tried to counter. Your Honor, physical space doesn't mean adequate conditions. You're right, Doctor, Caleb interrupted politely, which is why I brought this. He pulled out a transparent folder full of photos. Pictures of our home taken last week. As you can see, we have proper furniture, a working fridge, a stove in perfect condition, a TV, and a study desk where I do my homework daily. The photos passed to the judge, showing a small but spotless, lovingly organized apartment. Here's my room, which I share with my mom, Caleb continued, pointing to a photo. We have 2 beds, a wardrobe, a shelf with my school books. There's my study desk, where I learned all the laws I'm citing today. Richard couldn't look at his son, knowing every word was true and every lie he'd spun was being publicly exposed. My father also claimed I'm left alone while my mom works, Caleb continued, consulting the filing. That's false. May I prove it? He pulled a letterhead document. This is a statement from James Wilson Municipal School, where I study, confirming I'm there full-time from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And after 6? The judge asked. My mom picks me up, and we go home together. We eat dinner, she helps with my homework, we watch TV, and go to bed. I'm never alone, Your Honor. Emily nodded in confirmation. It's true, Your Honor. Rosanna is punctual every day to pick up Caleb. Dr. Michael tried again. Your Honor, but what about weekends? Or school holidays? Caleb smiled for the first time in the hearing. Good question, Doctor. On weekends, my mom doesn't work. We're together all the time, going to the park, the grocery store. She teaches me to cook. During holidays, I stay with Ms. Linda Davis, our neighbor, while Mom works. And who's Ms. Linda? The judge asked. Linda Davis, 68, retired, lives in apartment 302 of our building for 15 years. She's here to testify if needed. The judge looked to the gallery, where a kind elderly woman waved from the 3rd row. Can you come forward, ma'am? Ms. Linda rose slowly, leaning on a cane, her floral dress immaculate. Ms. Linda, the judge said gently, do you know Caleb's family? I've known them for 2 years, Your Honor, she replied clearly. Rosanna is a hard-working, honest woman, and Caleb is an angel. During holidays, he stays with me. We bake cookies, watch soaps, and he teaches me school stuff. Does the child give you trouble? Ms. Linda laughed. Trouble? Heavens, no. He helps with everything. Dishes, organizing my meds, reading the paper for me because my eyes are weak. He's like the grandson I never had. And the father? Does Mr. Richard visit? Ms. Linda's face hardened. In 2 years, I've seen him 3 times. Twice to argue with Rosanna about money. What kind of arguments? He'd show up asking her to lend him money or to take Caleb for weekends to impress his new girlfriend. But when Caleb was sick or needed anything, he vanished. Richard tried to defend himself. That's not true. I always cared about my son. Ms. Linda pointed at him. Cared? Nonsense, young man. When Caleb had pneumonia last year, his mother rushed him to the hospital. You didn't even know he was sick. I didn't know, Richard stammered. Didn't know because you didn't want to, Ms. Linda retorted firmly. Rosanna called you 5 times. You didn't answer once. Caleb seized the moment. Your Honor, my father also claimed I don't get proper medical care. I can prove that's a lie. He pulled a folder full of medical records. Here are all my medical exams from the last 2 years. Pediatrician visits every 6 months, dentist every 4 months, all vaccines up to date. The judge leafed through, impressed by the organization. Who pays for these? My mother, Your Honor. She has health insurance through her job. When I need expensive medicine, she works extra weekends to afford it. What kind of extra work? She cleans private homes on Saturdays and Sundays, earning $15 per house. I've seen her clean 4 houses in one Saturday to buy my flu medicine. Rosanna wept in the back, moved by her son's recounting of her sacrifices. Meanwhile, Caleb looked at Richard. My father never paid a cent for my medical expenses, not even when I was hospitalized with pneumonia. I didn't know you were hospitalized. Richard protested. You didn't know because you didn't want to, Caleb replied coldly. My mom called you 7 times that day. You hung up on her. Dr. Michael shifted tactics. Your Honor, finances are important, but what matters is the emotional bond. Emotional bond? Caleb interrupted. Want to talk about emotional bonds, Doctor? He pulled more photos from his folder. These are from my last birthdays, 6 and 7 years old. As you can see, my mom, Ms. Linda, Ms. Emily, and some school friends are there. The judge examined the photos, simple but loving parties, Caleb blowing out candles on a homemade cake, hugging his mom. And where's your father in these? He's not in any, Your Honor, because he never came to my birthdays. Richard flushed. I was working on your 6th birthday. You were at a barbecue with your girlfriend, Caleb said emotionlessly. I saw the photos on her Facebook. On my 7th, you were at a beach in Miami. Also saw the photos. Richard's embarrassment was evident to all. Your Honor, Caleb continued relentlessly, my father talks about an emotional bond, but I can prove it never existed on his part. He pulled a small notebook from his folder. This is my diary. I've kept it for 2 years. May I read some entries? You may. Caleb opened to a marked page. September 15th, last year, 3 days after my birthday. Today's 3 days since I turned 7. Dad didn't come to my party. Mom said he was busy, but I saw her cry in the bathroom. The courtroom was silent, the innocence of those words heartbreaking. October 23rd, he continued. Dad came by today, stayed half an hour. Brought a gift still with the store tag. I think he bought it in a rush. He didn't know my favorite superhero. Several in the gallery wiped their eyes discreetly. December 12th. Dad called, said he'd pick me up Sunday for a walk. I waited from 2 to 6 p.m. He didn't show. Mom made an excuse, but I know he forgot. Richard couldn't look at his son. Each diary entry was a stab to his conscience. "Want me to continue, Your Honor?" Caleb asked. "I have notes of 15 promises my dad made and broke." 15. "No need," the judge said gently. "I understand." Dr. Michael tried one last time. "Your Honor, children can exaggerate situations." "Exaggerate?" Caleb turned to him with indignation. "Doctor, do you have kids?" "I do." "Have you ever forgotten their birthdays?" "Never." "Promised a walk and not shown up?" "No." "Gone months without seeing them?" "Never." "Then don't say I'm exaggerating. You wouldn't let your kids go through this, but think it's fine for me." Dr. Michael had no response. A 7-year-old had just given him a lesson in fatherhood. "Your Honor," Caleb continued, "I have one more key piece of evidence." He pulled a sealed envelope from his folder. "Here are all the messages my mom sent my dad over the last 2 years. WhatsApp, texts, all printed and notarized." The judge took the envelope. "What kind of messages?" "Messages about me, doctor's appointments, school grades, performances, health issues. My mom always tried to keep my dad informed about my life. He rarely replied, and when he did, it was one word: okay, fine, cool. Never asked for details, never truly cared." Caleb opened the envelope and pulled out sheets. "May I read some?" "You may." Message from May 15th. "Richard, Caleb had a school presentation today. He talked about jobs and said he wants to be a lawyer to defend people. He was amazing." Response: "Okay." Message from July 3rd. "Caleb got a perfect score on his English test. His teacher said he writes better than many older kids. I'm so proud." Response: "Cool." Message from August 18th. "Richard, Caleb's had a fever for 2 days. I'm taking him to the doctor tomorrow. If you want to come, it's at 9 a.m. at the clinic." No response. The courtroom was silent. It was impossible not to be moved. "Your Honor," Caleb said, tucking away the messages, "is this an emotional bond? Is this a present father? Is this paternal love?" The judge shook his head. "No, Caleb, it's not." "So," Caleb continued, "when I learned my dad wants my custody only to control my inheritance, I wasn't surprised. I was sad, but not surprised." He turned to Richard one last time. "Dad, for 7 years, I dreamed you'd love me for real, spend time with me, meet my friends, help with homework, comfort me when I'm sad." His voice trembled, but he pressed on. "Now I understand that'll never happen, because to love someone, you have to see them as a person, not an object." Richard tried to speak. "Caleb, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Caleb cut him off. "I understand I'm just a means to get rich for you." He turned to the judge. "That's why, Your Honor, besides renouncing the inheritance, I have one final request." "What?" "I want it recorded that I wish no visitation or contact with my father. I don't want to be forced to see someone who views me as money, not a son." The final bombshell hit the courtroom. Richard stood, frantic. "You can't do this. I'm your father." "Father by blood," Caleb replied with devastating calm. "A real father is the one who raised me, loved me every day. That's my mom." Dr. Michael was officially defeated. No legal or emotional argument could save his client. "Your Honor," Caleb concluded, "based on all evidence presented, I request that my custody remain solely with my mother, Rosanna Silva, and that any future visitation requests by Richard Carter be denied." He closed his superhero folder with the solemnity of a seasoned lawyer. "Those are the proofs I have to present." The judge was silent for long seconds, processing the extraordinary scene. Never in 3 decades had he seen anything as impressive as this 7-year-old defending his family with a jurist's competence. "Caleb," he said finally, "you are an extraordinary young man. Your arguments are flawless, your evidence irrefutable, and your maturity astonishing." "Thank you, Your Honor. But before you decide, I have a question. How did you learn all this? How does a 7-year-old master family law with such precision? Caleb smiled for the second time. That's a long story, Your Honor. It started 3 weeks ago when I learned the truth about my dad. Tell it. The entire courtroom leaned forward, eager to hear how this remarkable boy had come to this point. I can, Caleb said. But it's a story that explains not just how I learned the law, but how I discovered love is worth more than any money. The judge settled in. I'm listening, Counselor Caleb. It was time to recount how it all began, how an ordinary boy became a warrior capable of facing his own father in court, and how he learned what truly matters in life. It all started 3 weeks ago, Caleb said, looking at the judge with the same seriousness he'd maintained throughout. It was a rainy Thursday, March 15th, 2 p.m. I was in my room, playing school with my action figures, when I heard my dad on the phone. The courtroom was silent. Everyone wanted to know how this extraordinary boy got here. It wasn't normal for him to call our house, he continued. It had been almost 6 months since we'd heard from him. My mom was at work, so I was alone with my figures, pretending to be their teacher. He paused, reliving the moment. I heard his voice from the living room and thought, that's weird, Dad's here? He usually didn't even come inside. When he picked me up for a rare visit, he waited at the building's entrance. The judge leaned forward, engrossed. Then I realized he wasn't in the room. He was on the phone, but his voice was loud. So I left my figures and went to my bedroom door to listen better. Caleb took a deep breath, bracing to relive the most painful moment of his life. The first thing I heard was, listen, lawyer, I want the kid's custody, and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to make up. I thought, kid? Is he talking about me? The courtroom remained deathly silent. Then he said, the kid's gonna inherit a big sum from his granddad when he turns 18. Nearly $600,000. And that's when my world fell apart. Caleb's voice wavered slightly, but he stayed firm. $600,000. I didn't even know I had a rich grandfather, let alone an inheritance. But what hurt most wasn't the money. It was realizing my dad was talking about me like I was an object, not a person. Rosanna wept quietly in the back, reliving her son's pain. Then he said, if I get custody, I control that money. I understood everything, Your Honor. My dad didn't want me back because he missed me or loved me. He wanted me as a bank account. Caleb paused to steady his emotions. The worst part came next. He said, the kid's mother doesn't know about the inheritance. That woman can barely read, let alone understand estates. The contempt in Caleb's voice as he repeated his father's words made the audience shake their heads in disgust. In that moment, Your Honor, I felt an anger I'd never known, not for me, but for my mom. How dare he talk like that about the woman who raised me alone, who works 12 hours a day to give me everything? Caleb glanced at Rosanna. My mom may not have much education, but she's the smartest person I know. She does math in her head better than any calculator, knows when I'm sad just by looking at me, makes the best chocolate cake with simple ingredients. Some in the gallery smiled through tears. Then he said, by the time she figures it out, I'll have it all sorted, and laughed. Laughed at my mom, at me, at the whole situation like it was a big joke. Caleb's indignation was palpable. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let him use our ignorance about the inheritance to tear us apart. So what did you do? The judge asked, intrigued. I did something I learned from detective shows on TV. I ran to my room, grabbed my mom's phone, and went back to the door. I hit record and captured the rest of the conversation. Dr. Michael tried to object. Your Honor, clandestine recording. Doctor, Caleb interrupted politely. I was 7 and trying to protect my family. I didn't know I was making a clandestine recording. I just knew I needed proof of my dad's plan. The judge nodded. Continue, Caleb. I recorded him saying, file for custody tomorrow. Claim the mother's unfit, leaves the kid alone, no proper home, the stuff you guys know how to spin. And the final part, that woman can barely read. By the time she figures it out, I'll have it all sorted. Followed by that cruel laugh that made me want to throw up. Caleb paused, reliving the nausea. When he hung up, I ran to the bathroom and vomited. Not because I was sick, but because I'd learned my own father was capable of lying in court to use me for profit. The courtroom's silence was heavy. I sat on the bathroom floor, crying for nearly an hour. I didn't know what to do with that information. How could I tell my mom her ex-husband was plotting a legal trap? Emily squeezed Caleb's shoulder in silent support. When my mom got home that night, I watched her take off her sore shoes, complain about back pain, but always with a smile for me. I thought, how can I destroy her peace with this? What did you decide? The judge asked. I tried to act normal at first. We ate dinner, she helped with my homework, we watched a cartoon. But when we went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking. Caleb looked at the courtroom ceiling, reliving the scene. I stayed up all night watching my mom sleep in our small shared room after a long day of hard work. I thought, she doesn't deserve this. She doesn't deserve to be deceived again. Again? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. My dad had already deceived her before. When he left, he said he needed time to think about life. She waited for him for almost a year, then found out he was living with another woman. Richard sank deeper into his chair, exposed for his lies and betrayals. The next day, Friday, I went to school with a plan, to tell my teacher, Ms. Emily. She's been like a second mom to me. Emily smiled through tears, proud of Caleb's trust. At recess, instead of playing, I went to her classroom where she was grading papers. I knocked and asked to talk about something serious. How did she react? She saw I was different. I'm usually a happy, playful kid, but that day I was serious, worried. She dropped her papers and gave me her full attention. Caleb turned to Emily gratefully. I told her everything, the call, the inheritance, my dad's plan, the recording. She listened silently, and when I finished, I saw tears in her eyes. What did she say? She said, Caleb, you're a very brave boy. Then asked if I was sure of what I'd heard. I played the recording for her. Emily nodded. It was one of the most shocking moments of my teaching career. When she heard it, Caleb continued. Ms. Emily was outraged. She said it was unacceptable, that my dad had no right to toy with our family like that. What was her advice? She said I needed to tell my mom immediately, that she had a right to know, even if it hurt. Caleb glanced at Rosanna. But I was scared, Your Honor. Scared my mom wouldn't know how to defend herself. She's so simple, so trusting. I knew she'd be lost in a courtroom facing fancy lawyers and serious judges. That's when Ms. Emily told me something that changed everything. What? That before becoming a teacher, she'd studied law for 2 years in college. She didn't graduate because she had to work to support her family, but she knew the basics of family and child law. The courtroom perked up. This was the pivotal moment. She explained there was a legal possibility for me to represent my family in court, not as an official lawyer, but as a family assistant. She said it was rare, but the law allowed it. Did you accept that possibility? At first, I thought it was crazy. How could a 7-year-old face trained lawyers in court? But then Ms. Emily asked me a question that changed my perspective. What question? She asked, Caleb, what's more important, being afraid or protecting the ones you love? And that's when I knew I had no choice. Either I learned to defend us, or my dad would tear us apart. Caleb took a deep breath, reliving that moment of resolve. So I told Ms. Emily, teach me everything I need to defend my mom. And she said, Caleb, it'll be tough. You'll have to study complex laws, memorize articles, understand things even adults struggle with. Did you back down? The opposite, Your Honor. The more she said it was hard, the more I was sure I could do it. Because when you truly love someone, nothing's too hard. The courtroom was gripped by the narrative. That same afternoon, Ms. Emily came to our house to talk to my mom. She told her everything: the call, the inheritance, my dad's plan, my idea to defend us in court. How did your mom react? She cried a lot, not from sadness, but anger at being deceived again, at seeing her ex-husband try to use her son as an object. Rosanna nodded, recalling that painful day. Then she panicked. How will I defend myself? She kept saying. I don't know law. I can't afford a lawyer. I'll lose my son to that awful man. That's when you stepped in. Yes. I took her hands and said, Mom, you won't lose me. I'll be your lawyer. I'll learn everything to protect our family. Caleb smiled, recalling the moment. My mom looked at me like I was crazy. Caleb, you're 7. But I said, so what? I'm 7, but I love you enough to face the whole world. Several in the courtroom wiped tears discreetly. Ms. Emily explained to my mom it was possible that I could represent our family with her supervision, that we'd study together, prepare all evidence, organize all arguments. Did your mom agree? She hesitated at first, worried it was too heavy for my age. But when I played her the recording of my dad, when she heard his contempt for our family, she knew we had no choice. Caleb looked at Richard. My mom heard you call her trash, Dad. Heard you plan to deceive us, use us, tear us apart. That's when she knew we had to fight. Richard couldn't meet his son's eyes. That night, the 3 of us sat at the kitchen table and made a pact. We'd study together, work together, fight together. We wouldn't let anyone destroy our family for money. How did you start studying? Saturday morning, Ms. Emily showed up with a suitcase full of law books, civil code, child and adolescent statute, constitution. It was like she brought a whole library. Caleb laughed, recalling the scene. She spread them on our little kitchen table and said, Caleb, if you want to be your mom's lawyer, you have to study like one. Let's start with the basics. What's parental authority? Was it hard at first? Very hard, Your Honor. The first words felt like another language. Parental authority, unilateral custody, child's best interest. I didn't understand anything. How did you overcome that? Ms. Emily was patient. She explained each legal term in simple words. For example, parental authority, she said, it's the right and duty of parents to care for their kids, but it has limits. It can't be used against the child's interest. Caleb looked at Emily gratefully. She turned complex laws into language I could grasp. And the more I learned, the more I got hooked. It was like discovering a secret code to protect people. How long did you study each day? Every day after school, 6 to 9 p.m., weekends from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., with breaks for lunch and snacks. The judge was impressed. 3 weeks of intensive study. Exactly. And you know what was most interesting, Your Honor? What? I found I had a knack for memorizing laws. My brain was like a sponge for legal info. In a week, I was reciting entire civil code articles. Emily confirmed proudly, Caleb has exceptional legal intelligence. In 2 weeks, he knew more about custody and parental authority than many lawyers. But the most important part wasn't memorizing laws, Caleb continued. It was understanding that the law exists to protect people, especially the vulnerable. And right then, my mom and I were the vulnerable ones. How so? My dad had money for a fancy lawyer, knew about the inheritance we didn't, had experience manipulating situations. We only had one thing in our favor. What? The truth, Caleb said with devastating simplicity. And I learned that when you have truth on your side and know the laws that protect it, you can face any opponent. The courtroom was moved by this life lesson from a 7-year-old. That's how, Your Honor, an ordinary black boy became his mother's lawyer. Not for ambition or revenge, but for pure, simple love. Caleb looked around the courtroom. And now you know how I got here. Through 3 weeks of the most intense study of my life, driven by determination to keep anyone from destroying my family. The judge was silent for a few seconds, processing the extraordinary story. "Caleb," he said finally, "you're proof that when a child is driven by true love, they can move mountains." "Thank you, Your Honor. But the story's not over." "How so?" "I still need to tell how I turned all this knowledge into a courtroom strategy and prepared every piece of evidence I presented today." The judge smiled. "Then continue, Counselor Caleb. We're all eager to hear the rest." It was time to share the second part of this remarkable journey, how a 7-year-old prepared to face his own father in the most important courtroom battle of his life. After 2 weeks studying law, Caleb continued to the wrapped courtroom. "I knew all the laws on custody and parental authority, but Ms. Emily taught me that knowing the law is only half the job. The other half is knowing how to use it in court." The judge settled in, fully absorbed. It was Monday, April 3rd, when Ms. Emily came to our house with news that changed everything. She'd gotten a call from the school saying a court officer had delivered a summons for my mom. Rosanna nodded sadly, recalling that terrible day. "My mom opened the envelope with trembling hands," Caleb continued. "It was my dad's official petition for my custody. As she read it aloud, I saw it was exactly as he'd planned in that phone call." "What were the allegations?" the judge asked, though he knew the answer. "Material and emotional abandonment by my mom, neglect of medical care, inadequate home environment, lack of school supervision. All lies, but very well crafted legally." Caleb paused, remembering his mother's despair. "My mom started crying and said, 'Caleb, how will I prove these are lies? Who'll believe a cleaning lady against a man with money for a fancy lawyer?' That's when I knew I had to be more than a kid who knew laws. I had to be a real strategist." Emily smiled proudly, recalling that turning point. "Ms. Emily sat me down at the kitchen table and said, 'Caleb, now we'll make you a real lawyer. It's not enough to know the law. You need to build a solid defense, organize evidence, anticipate the opponent's arguments.'" "How did you do that?" the judge asked, genuinely curious. "First, Ms. Emily taught me to think like a lawyer. She said, 'Imagine you're your dad's lawyer. What arguments would you use?' I listed them. I'd say my mom works too much and leaves me alone. Our house is too small, she's uneducated, can't give me a better future." Caleb's maturity in analyzing the situation was striking. Then she asked, "How would you counter each of those?" "That's when my real legal education began." "Explain." "For every lie my dad told, we needed irrefutable proof. He said I'm left alone, we'd prove I'm at school full-time. He said our house is inadequate, we'd photograph every room. He said I lack medical care, we'd gather all my exams and appointments." The courtroom followed every word intently. "But Ms. Emily taught me it's not enough to have proof, you have to present it convincingly. She said, 'Caleb, in court, it's not enough to be right. You have to prove you're right.'" "How did you organize the evidence?" "We turned our house into a real law office. The kitchen table became our workspace. My mom bought plastic folders, and we sorted everything by category." Caleb gestured, mirroring the organization he'd shown in court. "Folder 1, school documents, report cards, attendance records, teacher recommendations. Folder 2, medical records, exams, prescriptions, vaccination records." "How many folders?" 8, Your Honor. Folder 3, home documents, lease agreement, paid bills, photos of every room. Folder 4, financial records, mom's pay stubs, bank statements, receipts for everything she buys me." The judge was impressed by the meticulous organization. Folder 5, evidence of my dad's abandonment, all the messages mom sent him with no reply, photos of my birthdays he didn't attend, proof he never paid child support. Richard shrank further, his neglect systematically documented. Folder 6, statements from people who know us, Ms. Linda, neighbors, school staff. Folder 7, the recording of my dad's conversation and our legal analysis of it. And Folder 8. Caleb smiled for the first time in the flashback. Folder 8 was special. It was my legal arguments folder, all the laws I memorized, organized by theme, with simple explanations I wrote myself. Emily leaned forward. May I add, Your Honor? Of course. Caleb created his own study system. He'd read each law multiple times, memorize it, then write in his own words what it meant practically. For example, Article 1634 of the Civil Code. Caleb recited from memory. The law says, both parents, regardless of marital status, have full parental authority. My translation, married or not, both parents are responsible for their kids. The judge smiled. Very smart. But here's the practical part, Caleb continued. Since my dad abandoned that responsibility for 3 years, he lost the right to claim parental authority just when it suits him financially. Did you study every possible defense argument? All of them, Your Honor. Ms. Emily played my dad's lawyer, and I had to counter every point. It was like a game, but a very serious one. Give me an example. She'd say, Caleb, your dad's lawyer will claim he has better financial conditions to raise you. I'd respond, Article 1583 of the Civil Code says custody considers not just material conditions but emotional bonds and the ability to provide proper education and development. The courtroom was awed by the meticulous preparation. Then I'd add, my mom may not have much money, but she gave me excellent education, constant medical care, and above all, unconditional love. My dad has money but no love. And money without love doesn't raise healthy kids. How did you simulate the hearing? That was the most important part, Caleb said, animated. Ms. Emily turned our living room into a mini courtroom. She sat in a high chair as the judge, Mom in the audience, and I had to present all my arguments like it was the real hearing. How was it at first? Awful, Caleb laughed. I got nervous, forgot laws, stammered. But Ms. Emily was patient. She said, Caleb, you're not just defending a case, you're defending your family. Remember that when you're nervous. Emily confirmed. We rehearsed over 20 times until Caleb could present everything naturally. But the hardest part wasn't memorizing laws, Caleb continued. It was preparing emotionally to face my dad. The courtroom leaned in. This was the most delicate part. Ms. Emily explained that in court, my dad and his lawyer would try to discredit me, humiliate me, make me seem like a kid playing grown-up. She said, Caleb, they'll attack you personally because they can't attack your arguments. How did you prepare for that? By practicing staying calm in tough situations. Ms. Emily would simulate attacks, saying things like, you're just a kid, you don't know law, and I had to respond calmly, citing laws and staying polite. Did it work? It took time. At first, I got mad and wanted to yell back, but Ms. Emily taught me that in court, losing your cool means losing credibility. Caleb glanced at Dr. Michael, who'd tried to discredit him all hearing. She taught me that when someone attacks you personally instead of your arguments, it's because they have no arguments. That's a victory, not a defeat. What an important lesson. The most important lesson came 3 days before the hearing, Caleb continued. I was nervous, scared of failing, of losing my mom. Ms. Emily sat with me and said, Caleb, want to know your greatest strength in court? What was it? She said, your greatest strength is the truth. You won't win because you're smart, though you are. You won't win because you know laws, though you do. You'll win because you're defending what's right. The courtroom was silent, absorbing the profound lesson. Your dad is lying, she continued. His lawyer knows he's lying. The judge will see they're lying. And when people lie in court to hurt a child, they always lose. Did that calm you? Completely, because I realized I didn't need to be perfect, just honest and prepared. And the final preparation? The day before, we did our last rehearsal. But instead of practicing legal arguments, Ms. Emily asked me something different. What? Caleb, if you could say just one thing to the judge, what would it be? I answered without hesitation, that I don't want to be rich with a dad who doesn't love me. I'd rather be happy with a mom who loves me truly." Several in the courtroom wiped tears. Ms. Emily smiled and said, "You're ready, because that sentence is worth more than all the legal articles in the world." "Did you sleep well the night before?" "Badly," Caleb admitted. "I kept imagining facing my dad, speaking to a real judge. What if I failed? But my mom saw I was worried. She lay beside me and said, 'Caleb, no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm already proud of you. Seeing my 7-year-old son fight for our family is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.'" Rosanna wept quietly, recalling that night of anguish and pride. "Then she told me something that changed everything. She said, 'Know why I'm so calm, even though I might lose you? Because if I do, it won't be for lack of trying. We fought together, and if that's what fate decides, at least we did everything we could.'" "Did that calm you?" "Totally, because I understood the outcome wasn't just up to me. It was up to justice, truth, and the love that drove our fight." "And the morning of the hearing?" "I woke at 5 a.m. without an alarm, took a shower, put on my best clothes, a white shirt and blue pants Mom bought for the courtroom. I was nervous, but not scared of failing, excited to show what I'd learned." "And your mom?" "She was more nervous than me," Caleb smiled. "She checked my folder 3 times, made sure I had all the documents, asked if I remembered all the laws. On the bus, I mentally reviewed all my arguments, but I also did something Ms. Emily taught me." "What?" "I prayed. I'm not very religious, but I asked God for strength to defend my family with dignity." "And when you got to the courthouse?" "Seeing that big, imposing building full of serious people in suits, my heart raced. I thought, how's a 7-year-old black boy going to face all this? What gave you courage?" My mom held my hand and said, "Remember, my son, you're not here to impress anyone, you're here to tell the truth." And Ms. Emily added, "And the truth always wins in the end." "That's when you entered." We walked to the courtroom door together. Before going in, I organized my folder, took a deep breath, and mentally reviewed everything I'd studied. "What was your first thought seeing the judge?" "I thought, he seems like a good person, someone who'll listen to what I have to say." That's when all my preparation made sense. "How so?" "Because I realized I wasn't there to show I was smart or impress anyone. I was there to protect my family with the tools I'd learned." Caleb looked at the judge gratefully. "When I stood and said, 'I am my mother's lawyer,' I wasn't a kid playing grown-up. I was a son defending the person I love most in the world." The courtroom was silent, emotional. "That's how, Your Honor, 3 weeks of intense study, unconditional love, and iron determination turned an ordinary boy into the youngest lawyer this courtroom has ever seen." "And now, Caleb," the judge asked, "how do you feel after telling this story?" "I feel at peace, Your Honor, because whatever your decision, I know I fought honorably for my family and learned that when a child is driven by true love, they can move mountains." Caleb closed his superhero folder for the last time. "That's what I wanted to share about how I became my mother's lawyer, not for ambition or revenge, but for pure, true love." The judge was silent for long seconds, processing this extraordinary tale of courage, determination, and family love. It was time to return to the present. It was time for the decision that would change this brave family's life forever. Judge Robert Johnson sat in silence for nearly 2 minutes after Caleb finished, a stretch that felt like hours to the courtroom. He removed his glasses, cleaned them carefully, looked at the remarkable 7-year-old black boy, then at the documents spread across his desk. "Caleb," he said finally, his voice carrying 3 decades of experience. "In 30 years, I've seen thousands of cases, brilliant lawyers, moving witnesses, irrefutable evidence, but never, ever have I seen anything like today." The courtroom was deathly silent. Everyone knew they were witnessing a singular moment in American judicial history. "You're not just a smart boy who memorized laws," the judge continued, looking into Caleb's brown eyes. "You're a living example that true justice comes from love, courage, and determination to protect those we love." Richard buried his face in his hands, knowing his defeat was total and irreversible. Dr. Michael nervously shuffled papers, at a loss after the public humiliation. Based on all evidence presented, the judge stood solemnly, and considering the clear and unequivocal statement of the minor Caleb about his wishes, this court decides. The silence was deafening. Rosanna gripped Emily's hands, both crying with anticipation. Ms. Linda prayed quietly. Caleb stood tall, ready for any outcome. The custody of the minor Caleb Silva remains exclusively with his mother, Rosanna Silva, and the petitioner Richard Carter's request is denied. The courtroom erupted in applause. Strangers clapped, moved. Normally stoic court staff smiled openly. Rosanna collapsed in tears of relief and joy. Furthermore, the judge continued as silence returned, I order that any future requests for visitation or contact by the petitioner be denied, as requested by the minor. Richard tried to stand. Your Honor. Mr. Richard, the judge cut him off with authority. You had 7 years to be a father to this exceptional child. You chose abandonment. Now you return only for financial gain. This court does not condone such opportunism. But I have rights. Rights are earned through fulfilled duties, Caleb said, standing. You never fulfilled your duties as a father, so you've lost all rights. The judge banged his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. But the story was just beginning. 3 months later, Rosanna's phone rang at 7 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. Ms. Rosanna, this is ABC News. Caleb's story has gone viral nationwide. We'd like an interview for 2020s. It was true. The hearing's recording, authorized for educational purposes, had spread like wildfire online. Caleb the lawyer was trending on Twitter. Legal pages shared his arguments. Mothers cried watching his emotional defense. Mom, look. Caleb shouted from the living room, pointing at the TV. His speech about love versus money was on the morning news. I don't want to be famous, Caleb said with his usual maturity. I want other kids to see they can fight for their rights. 5 years later, at 12, Caleb Silva to address Congress, announced the Speaker of the House. He stepped to the main podium, taller, more mature, but with the same determined eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice echoed through the packed chamber. 5 years ago, a 7-year-old black boy stood in a courtroom and said, I am my mother's lawyer. Today, that same boy returns to show what his fight achieved. The audience listened in respectful silence. I propose the Children's Legal Education Act, requiring all U.S. schools to teach a mandatory course on children's rights, where kids learn their basic rights, how to protect themselves, how to report abuse. Can children understand laws? A congresswoman asked. They can, Caleb replied. I learned law at 7, not because I'm special, but because when a child needs to defend themselves, they'll learn anything. He looked at the audience intently. Imagine an America where no child is a victim of abuse because they know they can report it, where no child is manipulated in custody disputes because they know their rights, where no child has to become their mother's lawyer because every family can defend itself. The ovation lasted 5 minutes. The law passed unanimously. 9 years later, at 21, Yale Law School had never seen such a crowded graduation. Journalists, politicians, jurists, and families helped by Caleb's law came to see the boy who changed the U.S. legal system graduate. Caleb Silva, the dean announced, graduating with honors, top of the class. As he took the stage, the applause lasted 10 minutes. Rosanna wept with pride in the front row beside Emily. Fellow graduates, Caleb said at the podium, today we become lawyers, but being a lawyer isn't just knowing laws, it's using them to protect those who need it. So I announce the creation of the Caleb Silva Institute for Children's Rights Defense, offering free legal aid to all vulnerable children. The ovation was deafening. 7 years later, at 28, the Time Person of the Year award arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Caleb was in his office when the call came. Mr. Silva, congratulations. You've been chosen as Time's Person of the Year. At 28, he became the youngest American to receive the honor. The magazine cover read, The Boy Who Changed Justice, How Caleb Silva revolutionized children's rights worldwide. His institute now operated in 12 countries, protecting over 50,000 children. Mom, look. Caleb showed Rosanna the magazine, now coordinating the institute's social programs. My son on Time's cover, Rosanna said, crying with pride. Who'd have thought that little boy would change the world? I didn't change the world, Mom. I just used what you taught me, that love is worth more than money. That night, at the award dinner in New York, Caleb gave a speech that moved the world. 21 years ago, he said, a 7-year-old black boy stood in a courtroom and said, I am my mother's lawyer. Today, that phrase symbolizes that children have a voice, rights, and power to change the world. The international audience was silent. But let me be clear, I'm not special. I'm just a kid who had to grow up fast to protect who I loved. And I learned that when we're driven by true love, we can do extraordinary things. Applause echoed through the Manhattan Hall. Today, over 100 countries have adopted versions of Caleb's Law. Millions of children have access to justice. Families are protected from greed. All because a 7-year-old refused to be silenced. Caleb looked at the cameras broadcasting live worldwide. So I leave a message for every child watching. You have a voice, you have rights. When something's wrong in your life, don't accept silence. Fight, seek help, protect those you love, because sometimes, he concluded with a smile that recalled the brave 7-year-old, the smallest voices echo loudest in history. The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes, but for Caleb, the greatest reward remained the same as 21 years ago. Protecting his family and learning that love always triumphs over money. His story began with a 7-year-old saying, I am my mother's lawyer, and would continue forever as proof that when a child is driven by true love, they can truly change the world. Want to hear more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things? Subscribe to What No One Saw on YouTube for tales that inspire and uplift.